somebody
We just
do that.
made a new genre.
A lot of people's living rooms are like this, or bedrooms are like this.
There are ways to get around this.
Digital distortion is not good.
He brings a little backpack with him when he goes to record his vocals.
The best way I like to do this is
It's really sad when you hit an amazing take and you clipped it. Hey friend, welcome back to the Alex and Andrew podcast. Today we are going to be talking about 3 ways to get your best vocal recordings yet. And guess what? It's easier than you think. We are going all the way back to the basics in this video because that's where the real results come from, is getting it right from the start. We're so excited for this episode. Andrew, how you doing?
doing fantastic. I'm really pumped for this. This is going to be a series, so the next episode or few is going to be all about the back to basics, really making sure that we understand the basics, because the thing is, advanced producers never don't do the basics. They're always doing the basics. Always. They never skip it. And this is one thing that you just can't skip. And even if you've been doing this for a long time, you're still going to get a lot of value out of this video. And if you're an absolute beginner, you're going to love this. You're going to absolutely love it.
Exactly. Everything starts upstream. So if you think of upstream, that's like the song, and then a little bit more downstream is the recording, but that's still pretty high upstream. And then later comes things like mixing and mastering, editing, stuff like that. But what most don't realize is that they try and skip all the way to editing or all the way to mixing and mastering without just getting the recording right. And so we're going to assume that the song is a good song, and now we're in the recording stage. We got to nail this, because if you don't nail this, it doesn't matter how much you do in editing or mixing and mastering, the results are just going to be a little bit underwhelming. And we don't want you to be disappointed. So let's dive in. Make sure you're getting the best vocal recordings of your life. What is the first kind of topic we want to cover on this, Andrew?
Yeah, so I really want to stress that we're talking about the recording, because if you are trying to skip all this stuff and go directly to the other things that Alex had just mentioned, you're gonna miss a lot. And vocals are one of the most important parts of music, because you are actually like relating to other people through the lyrics. Most of the time, people listen to the lyrics and to the vocals first. That's where most of their critiques come from, and this is where like the most, like, you can get away with a lot of stuff except for vocals. Vocals like kind of get really, really tricky really quick. So the first thing is getting a decent recording, which is getting a clean source or eliminating a lot of that room echo. Have you ever been in a room like a church or a hall or a gymnasium, and you can clap and you can hear that reverberation around the room, that echo?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people's living rooms are like this, or bedrooms are like this, at a smaller level, but it's still there. What happens is when you're singing, your voice is not just going to the microphone, but it's being projected throughout the room, and it's bouncing off the walls, and then that is going back into your microphone, and that's causing this echo effect or this reverb or delay that's happening in your vocals, and it becomes a problem when you try to add it to the song. So what are some ways that you like to eliminate this?
The echo is such a good way to put it, Andrew. And you can hear it in the vocal recording. The whole point is to get the vocal as dry as possible. Things like echo and reverb are good on vocals, but good when you add them later. You want your actual recording to be really dry, because it makes the ending results a lot better. And there are a few good ways to do this. And of course, there are different things to consider. So let's talk about maybe putting up some treatment in your room, acoustic treatment. But also a lot of the time, you may not be able to do it. You're maybe not so crafty and handy and haven't built acoustic panels before. Don't stress. Like, there are ways to get around this. A few different ways are you can get a vocal shield for your microphone, which just goes around your mic and reduces the amount of echo that's bouncing off the walls coming back into your microphone. But you can take it even another step further and dial in on which microphone you're using, right? So something like a dynamic microphone, we know there's a few different types of microphones, but the ones we'll focus on right now are dynamic and condenser. Condenser microphones are much more sensitive. So if you're in a room with a lot of echo or you don't have treatment and you put up a condenser microphone, yes, it's going to pick up a lot of that nice detail in your voice, but it's also going to be much more susceptible to the room around you. So in that case, you may want to choose a dynamic microphone, which, just like the microphones that I'm using right now and Andrew is recording right now using in this podcast, it's mainly only picking up what's directly in front of it. And it eliminates a lot of, or reduces a lot of that sound that could be bouncing around in the room. So choosing a mic choice, like possibly a dynamic mic, to get a cleaner recording in terms of the room echo coming in. Or you can also use a condenser mic, but be very careful about your surroundings. So like setting up either a vocal shield. Sometimes you can make a little makeshift vocal booth. I know that Andrew has done this, and I know that I used to do it a bunch. I would literally set up mic stands and hang moving blankets from them and make kind of a vocal booth thing to eliminate those reflections. And then if you want, you can take it one step further. And I actually know an artist that I've worked with a lot, and he gets great vocal recordings because in his area where he lives, there's a facility with little vocal booths that you can actually rent and go in. But they're not like recording studios where there's, a console and a computer and all this stuff. It's literally just a very, very quiet room that is acoustically treated. And without having a computer or a recording console or any type of interface or anything like that, he brings a little backpack with him when he goes to record his vocals. And what he does is he puts his laptop, he puts his interface, right? Like maybe it's a PreSonus interface or a Focusrite interface or whatever it is, keeping it really simple, brings along his mic, a mic cable, and his headphones. And he can go and then there's a little table in this really small room, and he sets up his laptop on the table and sets up his mic, puts on his headphones, plugs himself in. Within a couple minutes, he's up and running, and just in this great sounding, totally professional vocal booth. So you can look around and see what type of options are like that near you. And if not, you can get really similar results by setting up the makeshift vocal booth with blankets, or maybe even trying in a closet and using the clothes around you, So you can get creative with it, but just eliminating that echo, that room echo. Think hard surfaces. If you see anything hard around you, hard drywall, that's going to have sound bouncing into the mic. So getting a really clean recording makes a massive, massive difference. The only other thing to consider with the recording is how loud you're recording into the microphone. So maybe, Andrew, you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I love everything that you just mentioned with getting a nice quiet room. I was going to say, if you have a closet, like that's like one of the best things ever. A lot of people that I work with, a lot of my clients record in a closet, and it just works. So yeah, I think that's one of the best ways to do it. Now the next thing is clipping, and every interface has some form of telling you whether it's clipping or not. And if not, you could still look in your DAW and see if it's hitting red when you're recording. If it's hitting the red on your meter while you're recording, it's clipping. Please don't do that. You can just turn it down so it's not clipping. And the best way I like to do this is if you're singing vocals, get to the loudest part of the song and then practice with it. Sing really loud into the microphone and adjust that gain knob on your interface until you're not clipping. I know on the Focusrite, it will actually turn red around that dial, letting you know you're clipping, and you just got to turn it down until you're in the green. Same thing in your DAW. If it's hitting the red, you're going to want to turn it down so it's in the green. You just need to make sure you're not clipping, because digital distortion is not good. Digital clipping is not good. That's when you're sending too much audio into your interface and into your computer, and it sounds very like crackly. If you're getting that crackly sound, that's why. Just turn it down so you don't get that clipping noise at all. And you can always turn it up later on. If you're too quiet, don't worry about it. You can always turn it up later on, but you can't turn it down after it's been clipped.
Exactly. So really good way, like Andrew's saying, is go to the part of your song where you're maybe going to sing loudest. You're going to hit that big note. And of course, manage your distance from your microphone, but also test that section of the song on your interface and test the level before, you try and do your best takes, because it's really sad when you hit an amazing take and you clipped it, meaning it's getting crunchy and distorted going in because your gain was too loud. So keep an eye on your clipping. Just make sure you don't clip, and that's going to make a really big difference in the quality.
Yeah, that makes just doing those two things, getting a clean sound at the source, so some sort of acoustic treatment if you have it, or some way of getting a nice quiet room to record in, and clipping. Those two things are going to literally 50, 100x the sound of your vocals. Like
it makes a massive difference.
Yeah, just do those two things. You're going to be just fine. And like Alex was saying earlier with the dynamic versus the condenser microphone. And the cool thing is dynamic microphones are typically cheaper. You can get a really nice dynamic microphone for about $100, like the SM58 or 57. Those are phenomenal microphones for, I think, $99 you could pick them up for US, which is great. And so you have like it's in your favor to get great sounding vocals. So that's what I would start with first. Now the next thing we want to talk about is performance, and we have a pretty hot topic question, and I'm genuinely curious about your take on this, Alex. But does pitch matter when capturing a performance?
Okay, so the reason this is such a great question is because in the modern day, we have pitch correction software like Auto-Tune or Melodyne, or even most DAWs now have some type of stock tuning solution to tuning vocals. So naturally, with these solutions being available, people have come to, and singers maybe have come to prioritize pitch a little bit less. And that's okay, but is it also something that we can completely ignore? Should we ignore pitch? Probably not, right? So does pitch matter? Yes. Does it need to be perfect pitch at all times in your raw recording? No. It's okay if, you veer out of the note a little bit at times. You just, the way I kind of think of it is, you still want to be hitting the right notes in your vocal performance, and naturally in singing and in trying to give your best performance and maybe putting passion and emotion into your performance, it might push you a little bit out of tune, like a few cents flat or a few cents sharp. But if a vocal is at the point where you're not even landing on the right note and you're trying to tune it like multiple, you're trying to tune it like 2 whole steps into a completely different note, it's going to start to sound unnatural. So the rule of thumb that I like to have is, like, in the vocal performance, like sing it in tune the best to your ability. And if it's a little out, it's okay. But if you're just hitting the wrong notes overall and trying to fix it later, that's where you're going to actually need to go back to the performance. Make sure the melody of your song is really strong in your head and that you know very confidently what that melody is, so that when comes time to record it, you're not kind of unsure of the melody and hitting some different notes that might not be the ones you're intending to and trying to fix them later, but rather you have that strong melody, you can sing it confidently, and if your pitch veered a little bit out, it's okay, because you can fix that with something like Melodyne. What do you think, Andrew?
I agree. I will say, though, if you're already in the recording process, just try to get the best performance you possibly can. Like Alex was saying, have a very strong melody in mind, understand exactly what you're going for in your performance, and then it'll be easy to catch while you're recording. And so if you're like, I was a little bit flat there, I think I could do it better, then just re-record it. Like, don't try to fix it in the mix. Don't try to fix it later on. Just try to get the best recording possible. And then when you add tuning later on, if you choose to do so, it will drastically increase the quality of that vocal. So definitely try to capture pitch, but it's not nearly as important, I don't think, as the next two, which is, 1, tone. If I'm singing super nasally like this, it's going to sound super different than if I have like a big, deep, bassy voice like that. And you have to make sure that you're paying attention to the differences in tone, how you shape your mouth and where everything is sitting. That's very, very important. You can't emulate that in the DAW. You cannot fix that later on.
Yep.
And tone is super, super important. I like to think of it as this way, is like one artist that I worked with, she was... it still is phenomenal. One of the most talented vocalists I've ever met in my life. but she does theater. She is a tone master. Like if you've ever watched like somebody perform like a musical in theater and stuff like that, the way they adjust their tone and change things constantly during the performance is absolutely incredible. It's amazing. And that ability is super, super powerful. And so as she's recording like theater type stuff, she's able to change the tone in that performance, and I absolutely loved it, and she was super, super great at it. And so having intention is very, very key here, and you want to make sure that you're capturing the tone you're looking for. If you sound nasally, you really can't fix that later on. You're going to want to make sure that you actually learn how to control your voice, get a good tone later on with that, and it's all in what you're looking for. This is very subjective, and that theater type music and the musicals and stuff like that, she'd get super nasally as she's trying to make an annoying comment, but then she would go back to a very thick, bright, punchy vocal as she's like holding out a note. She's super incredible. Just love recording her. By the way, that was an incredible experience. But that's what you really want to make sure you're paying attention to is tone. What do you think?
I totally agree. I think one thing to keep in mind is it's okay that your tone changes during the song, and do it intentionally. So like if the intro of your song is more gentle and then it's building, like just keep in mind that how your voice might change throughout the course of the song, but make sure you've done it intentionally. Like maybe in the verse, which is quieter, you might sing with a little more breathiness, which can also sound a little more emotional. And like breathy, like singing kind of more like this. But then as the chorus comes, you're going to be singing more from your diaphragm, pushing from your stomach. And then keeping in mind those times when you're singing through your nose. This is stuff like when we use something like an EQ, which is a tool we can use to adjust the tone a little bit, only a little bit after, we have these areas that engineers look at where there is nasaliness in the recording or honkiness in the recording. However, it's not, it doesn't actually fix it the way like it feels. If there's a truly nasally tone in a vocal or a really just kind of unpleasant tone in a vocal, the engineer can do some EQing, but you'll still just hear the voice kind of as it is. And it's more just of this overall feel of the way you're performing. So keeping that in mind. And I think that leads really well into also considering the emotion and the passion that you're putting in. Going back to what we said about tuning, I think the way that I kind of like to think of this is like, I would rather have a vocal that is performed really, really beautifully and maybe just slightly out of tune at times, which is okay because it can be tweaked. The tuning can be tweaked later, but having a really good, passionate performance, because you can't emulate that with tuning software or with EQ or what. Like the performance is so important. I'd rather have that vocal that's slightly out of tune but performed really well than having a perfectly in tune, perfectly recorded in tune, technical in time vocal that just the passion isn't there, and maybe the tone is just kind of monotone and just not really anything special. So the performance is super key.
I completely agree. And on top of that performance is also the breath control. If you are breathing in between every word, it sounds super exhausting for the listener. It's awful. And that happens a lot. You want to make sure that this whole thing is with capturing the performance, because that's what you do. When you are recording something, you're capturing the performance, nothing else. And so the performance has to be killer. And the best way to have a great performance is to have intention on that performance. If you are intentional on the tone, intentional on the melody, and intentional on where you're putting your breaths, you're going to have a great performance. And so I actually have artists that I've worked with that are very analytical about this, and they will write out exactly, okay, this word, breathe, this word, breathe. And I've worked with people like that. They're very, very good at what they do. They're very technical, and they also they know exactly the sound that they want in their head, and so they're super intentional with it. And that's just one of the best things that you can do for it. So make sure you know where your breaths are going into the performance. And if it seems a little off, that's fine. You can always record a little bit and then punch yourself in a little bit later on, like add another recording right underneath it. So you're listening to half the verse, and then you start recording your second take the other halfway through the verse to kind of help with that breath control, because recording a song from start to finish can definitely be exhausting, and I almost never have an artist do that. I usually work verse by verse, chorus by chorus, bridge by bridge, and work things out that direction. That's how I usually do it.
Same for me. I record in pieces as well. There's nothing like going and doing a 3-hour vocal session, working super, super hard, getting a bunch of great sounding recordings, and then going through the takes later, and every single take has this one breath in the wrong spot, and you don't have any takes where you did it properly. Like, I've been there. This is a mistake I've made before. And so now when I'm recording or have an artist recording, I always pay close attention. I'm like, are we going to regret having a breath in the middle of the phrase later? And usually it's like, yep, that's going to ruin the flow. So we carefully place the breaths in different places, because the breath is like in the middle of a sentence that's supposed to flow, and I have 10 takes, but all of them have that breath in the middle. It doesn't matter how many takes I did, I didn't foresee that ahead of time, and now I'm in trouble trying to edit it and make it sound natural, which is going to be hard to do. So just that careful placement of breaths, like Andrew said, it makes a huge difference in just the way it flows and turns out and feels. Yep. All right, let's move on to number 3, the third way to record your best vocals yet. What is it, Andrew?
Layers. So far we've gone to getting a nice clean sounding source. We've also gone to the performance, and now these stack in order, right? You have to make sure that everything sounds good while you're recording. You have to make sure that the performance you have sounds great. And now we're on to layers, which is adding harmonies, doubles, and ad-libs, and we'll get into that all here in a second. But I can't tell you how many times I've had artists send me one vocal. And if you're the person that's recording one vocal, most of the time, almost all of the time, you're going to want extra vocals layered on top. This is what makes things sound rich and full and massive. And even a lot of ballads have tons of vocals layered on top. Even if you're in the metal niche, you have tons of vocals layered on top. I do a lot of mixing for metal and a lot of producing metal. We have tons of vocals. And so the first thing that you want to capture is obviously that lead vocal. But the next thing could be harmonies, where you're adding extra melodies on top of the vocal you have already. You should know what harmonies are if you are a vocalist or you like music in general. Even if you just like music and you like listening to music, you probably know what harmonies are. You've probably played around and sang some stuff with your friends and stuff, and like you've made up some harmonies and you've had some fun singing along. Those are great to add to any track, and they just kind of really thicken it up.
Andrew, when you first said layers, it made me think of that line from Shrek. Ogres have layers. You were like, layers. Ogres have layers. Onions have layers.
What about cakes? Cakes have layers.
Cakes have layers. So think of your song like a cake or an onion, and it's just more exciting. If you just have a cake with one layer and no other layers, it's kind of boring cake, Yep. But if there are a few different layers there, it just makes it so much more flavorful and tasteful, and can enhance the experience of consuming the cake or consuming the song. And so harmonies are an amazing way to do it. Get some harmonies on to emphasize some lines. There are also some ways, like Andrew said, to make your song sound massive, and one of those could be just doubling as well the main lead vocal part. So this isn't singing an alternate harmony line that kind of goes alongside. It's rather singing the same exact melody again and recording 2 different layers of it that you can blend together. And this is actually pretty common to use in the choruses of songs, maybe in a verse. And there's no rule. You could do it in the verses too, depends on the song. But really common, you'll get the verse and that'll be a single vocal. And then in the chorus, to make it sound really big, you're going to have the lead vocal and a doubled vocal blended in with it to make it sound really full and really big. It's a really cool trick, and if you've never done it before, it can sound really cool, and you might even, the first time you double your vocal, you'll hear your voice in a new way you've never heard it before. And I think you're going to like it if you try it. So try the double. Obviously, be careful with it. You don't want to overdo it. I find having one of the vocals, your lead vocal up front, and then blending the double in a little bit, but not putting them like together at the same exact volume, but having your favorite take in front and then the doubled one a little bit behind it, that can really get that good effect that we're talking about. So you can give that a try too when it comes to layers.
It makes a massive difference. And I literally remember the first time I ever did doubles and how much it blew my mind. Because I heard Dave
It's
Grohl.
so crazy.
Yeah, I heard it was like the Dave Grohl sound, of Foo Fighters. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try this because I love Foo Fighters. And I tried it. I was like, what? What is this? And one way that you can take those doubles and even make it even better is to record your main vocal. And please, I'm just going to say this again. I've said this 1,000 times. You cannot duplicate the same recording. You cannot just command paste it down below.
That's not a double.
That's not a double.
They have to have slight different nuances between the takes, and that's what gives it that sound.
That's what gives it that sound. And so you can actually record two doubles. So your main vocal and then two doubles, and then put one in the left ear and one in the right ear while you're mixing. Makes a super wide sound. I love it. It's the same melody line. It's the same vocal. You try to capture the same melody and the same breaths and the same enunciation of words. And then you just put one in the center, your main vocal, and then you have the doubles and one in the left and one in the right. It just makes things sound super wide and super nice. I do that like almost every time. Every single mix that I'm working on, if they send me doubles, I always do that, and I really like
a lead vocal in the middle, a double left, and a double right.
Yep, I do that almost every time.
Sometimes I won't get sent. I'll only get sent two tracks, a lead and a double, and there are two different approaches that I'll take to this. Either I'll just blend the double in with it up the middle, and it gives the vocal kind of this extra thickness, or I'll leave the lead vocal as it is, and I'll take the second double track and I'll put a width plug-in on it, like maybe micro shift or doubler or just something really simple, and I'll push that and spread that vocal into the left and right ears and kind of do like a little trick to create that same effect as if there were a left and a right. But
I do that a lot too, yeah.
Yeah, but the whole theme of this podcast is nailing the recording right. So if you have the resources just to record a left and a right, like might as well record them both, and then you can play around with them after.
Exactly. And then the last thing is ad-libs. Now this is more or less for the hip-hop genre, rap
and pop, probably.
Pop. Yeah, and pop. A lot of pop would have that too. I do a lot of metal, so I don't get a lot of ad-libs. You know what I mean?
Imagine like a folk singer-songwriter song, and then just in between the phrases, he's like, hey, yeah.
That's amazing. Somebody do that, please. Somebody do that.
We just made a new genre.
We just made a new genre.
Yeah.
Ad-lib folk music. I love that so much.
Oh, man.
Yeah. But ad-libs are just that. They're just adding just these little, like, you just press record. For most of the time when I work with artists that do this, I just press record and they just kind of do their own thing. It's kind of in the moment and just adding some ad-libs on top of that. If you probably know what ad-libs are if you listen to that genre of music or any genre of music that uses ad-libs a lot. It's a very popular technique, and it just kind of keeps things interesting, keeps things moving, and adds a ton of ear candy. And I like to blend those in underneath. You don't want those nearly as loud as your main vocal, but they're underneath, and sometimes there's like a lot of like reverb and echo delay on them.
It's almost like you have your lead singer and there's kind of like this hype man just a little bit behind him that's like emphasizing what he's saying,
Yes.
If you picture someone standing on a stage and then a guy a little bit behind him, his mic isn't as loud, but the guy or gal in front is performing, and then the one behind is like, yeah, let's go, or what,
Yeah.
or maybe singing like a beautiful melody behind, hitting, it's the big epic chorus, it doesn't always have to be hip hop, but it's the big epic chorus of a song, and you have an ad lib hitting like a really beautiful high note, or like re-singing the line again in like a different way, and it's kind of behind and with a lot of reverb. So ad-libs it's just that little extra, some emphasis in between or behind lines that isn't doubling the lead vocal, isn't singing a harmony to the lead vocal, but rather giving something new and adding something, usually a beat or two after the lead vocal is sung. So those are some great ways to layer vocals.
I think you have a video on your channel about ad-libs, mixing ad-libs, if I'm not mistaken. I think you do.
Yeah, I actually I have a few different videos about rap vocals. So if I locate the one about that, I'll throw it in the description for you guys. But it really is a straightforward thing. You just don't want them as loud as your lead vocal. But it's honestly one of the most fun layers you can do. You can just have a blast recording ad-libs. It's always the funnest part.
It is. Oh, it's an absolute blast. I love it, and because you're in the moment, and people in the moment are kind of just like enjoying that and just kind of creating that in the moment. It's a lot of fun. So, if so far we've covered the recording, getting a clean performance. I just want to recap everything, and then we are actually capturing the performance, how to actually get a good performance, and what to capture and what to listen to while you're recording, and then adding layers, which is taking those two things and basically putting it on steroids and capturing more to make things sound better. So if you liked this episode, leave a review, and if you screenshot that review and send it to alexandandrewpodcast@gmail.com, we'll send you over a bonus episode. It's an episode that we had been working on for literally months. There's tons of value in it. It's over an hour long. You're going to love it. So just leave a review and send the screenshot of that review, no matter where it's at, Spotify, Apple Music, or iTunes and YouTube podcasts, anything. Just leave a review, send it over to the alexandandrewpodcast@gmail.com. That's alexandandrewpodcast@gmail.com. We'll send you over that podcast episode as soon as we see your review submission. It helps us grow the podcast, because podcasts
really
grow
does,
from word of mouth and from reviews. And so we really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys a ton, and we put a ton of effort into that bonus episode. You won't regret it once you see it. We can't wait. We really want to send it to you. So yeah, get your review over to us. We are so grateful for you guys and for the little community we're starting to build here. This is just the beginning, and we're just so pumped to have you guys enjoying this podcast with us. Andrew, great chatting with you.
I love it. That's it. This is the simplest way. This is the simplest way to get great vocal recordings at home. Remember, this is the Back to Basics series. Next week, we're going to be talking about something else that's back to the basics, but you're definitely not going to want to miss on it. Have a fantastic day, everybody, and don't forget to leave that review. We cannot wait to send you that episode.